Welcome to the Daily Fantasy 5, where we bring you the 5 things you need to know every day in the world of fantasy sports. Today is Friday, June 28th. This is episode 130, and we're going to be bringing you the top stories in Major League Baseball, I don't know if you want to call it a rumor in fantasy football, and then we'll be doing our top 4 fantasy wide receivers for the 2019 season. All this will be brought to you by www.mathradio.com, where you can pick up an online math course for your kids ages 7 through 17 for as little as $9.99. This will help them get better grades, score higher on exams, and even get into college. www.mathradio.com. All right, let's start off with the football story before we get to the baseball headlines. Kansas City Chiefs, Hill, wide receiver number 1 last year, met with the NFL for 8 straight hours with his lawyers. I think that meeting happened on Wednesday. So what will this mean for his NFL and fantasy future? We don't really know yet. I didn't even rank him in my top 20 because I simply don't know how much, if at all, he's going to play this year. So I kept him out of my rankings. I won't be drafting him this year. I suppose, well, let me rephrase that. If he falls to something like the 15th round, something crazy like that, and I can pick him up and kind of stash him for a while, that is the type of thing that can win you your playoffs at the end of the season. But, man, it's going to have to take a lot for me to draft him and not take someone who can actually play for me right now and win games. So that's Hill out of the Kansas City. The rest of the stories are all about baseball today. Craig Kimbral had his first game back for the Cubs last night. We were talking about that all week. He got a save in his first outing, but he did give up a walk and a double. So it wasn't the perfect outing, but you got to like getting the save in the first night out there. Some bad news in New York. Stanton will be out. We told you that yesterday. He's going on the injured list, but he's going to be out until at least August. Not good for Yankees owners. Yankees fans, Stanton owners, anybody that likes Stanton, Giancarlo in baseball or the Yankees. Anyway, kind of a cool story out of Tampa Bay. Brendan McKay, he is a two-way player. He pitches and bats DH in the minors. He is going to start on Saturday in the majors against the Rangers. So this two-way player has been incredibly effective as a pitcher. In Double-A this year, he had a 1.3 ERA with 62 strikeouts in 41 innings. In Triple-A this year, he pitched for about a month. He had a 1.08 ERA and 26 strikeouts in 25 innings. His batting hasn't been as hot. In Triple-A, he hit 265 with 4 home runs in about a month. So, this could be huge upside as far as fantasy goes. If he isn't owned, I would go out there and pick up Brendan McKay and just see if you catch lightning in a bottle for the second half of the season. He's certainly worth a flyer if you have a roster spot available. All right, that's all the news today for fantasy sports. We're going to go ahead and start breaking down our top 4 wide receivers. We'll start with number 4. Let's just go through the rest of the list real quick so you know where we're at. I had Ridley as number 20, Corey Davis as 19, Brandon Cooks as number 18, AJ Green, 17, 16 was Godwin, 15 is Woods, 14 is Galladay. Number 13 wide receiver is TJ Lockett. Number 12 is Diggs. 11 is Allen. 10 is Adam Thielen. 9 is Amari Cooper. 8 is Evans. 7 is Odell Beckham Jr. 6 is Antonio Brown. And 5th was Michael Thomas. So, can you guess who our 4th wide receiver is? Well, if you guessed Juju Smith-Schuster, you would be correct. Juju is another of my third-year breakout candidates. I admit it's kind of cheating to call him a breakout candidate because he really broke out last year. Even with Brown on the team, the guy managed 111 receptions on 166 targets. That is crazy pants. He had 1,400 yards and 7 touchdowns. That was good for 8th last year among fantasy wide receivers. So why do I have him ranked so high? Well, Smith-Schuster is now wide receiver number 1 in Pittsburgh all by himself. I expect him to have a breakout year like Devontae Adams had last year for the Packers. The floor is also incredibly high for Juju. It's hard to see him past as a top 5 receiver. Like, how could he possibly fall below that? Even if his targets flatten out at 170, let's say that, he's almost guaranteed to be a top 8 guy, right? That floor is just amazing because he's essentially going to do at least as well as he did last year or better being the number 1 target. At the top of the list, he's got great value. He's being drafted at 17th overall or the 7th wide receiver. I have no problem drafting this guy at the end of the first round. as kind of the fourth overall guy. He's in my my elite four. I think he's better than the other guys in the top 8, like Michael Thomas, Antonio Brown, Odell Beckham Jr. He just has less questions. He's going to slide nicely right into a role where he's the number 1 wide receiver, and he should get all those targets, all those opportunities, and I think he's in line for a great season. All right, number 3 on my list is Julio Jones. Jones finished 5th last season, despite only grabbing 8 touchdowns. And I say only, that is tied for his career high. So I understand that Jones has never seen double-digit touchdowns, but the guy is a lock for 1,400 yards every single year, no matter what. In fact, he's done it 5 years in a row now. Sanu and Ridley both saw 90-plus targets last year, but Julio still grabbed 113 receptions on 170 targets. It's crazy. This Atlanta passing game is for real. The only thing going against Jones is the lack of touchdowns. We spoke about that earlier. It seems equally plausible that he would grab 10 touchdowns this year or 2. And, I mean, there is some variance that comes with that touchdown production, right? It's like a 50-point swing between 2 and 10 touchdowns. I expect him to be around 8 again. I'll get 1 every other game, and that's still going to be good for a top 5 finish. Do I think he can finish number 1? Probably not, unless he does something he's never done before. But I think it's going to be hard for him to drop out of the top 5, which is why I have him ranked as the number 3 wide receiver in all of fantasy football. My number 2, I think there's a little bit of gap between 2 and 3 this year. I think Hopkins, my number 2 overall wide receiver, is significantly better than Julio Jones, Juju Smith-Schuster, any of those other guys. He finished 2nd last year behind only Hill, who we talked about earlier in the show. Again, I didn't even rank Hill in my top 20 because I don't know how much he's going to play, so I just left him off completely. But Hopkins is essentially the same player as Julio Jones, who we just talked about, but he hauls in twice the number of touchdowns. Right? He scored double-digit touchdowns in 3 of the last 4 seasons. ESPN says his ADP is 9th, right? But I've seen him drafted as early as 5th. More often than not, he goes 7th or 8th. I haven't been in these leagues where he's being drafted 9th. I don't know, or else he would be on every single one of my teams. If you want Hopkins, be ready to snag him early and make sure you have alternative plans at running back. I have no problem at all drafting Hopkins as early as 5th or 6th in a fantasy snake draft. No problem at all with that. Hopkins is amazing. I want him on my team. All right. Except I would rather have this other guy. Number 1 in my top 20 is Davante Adams from the Green Bay Packers. He was 3rd. Yes, he was 3rd last year. He managed to climb to the top of this list. How did he do it? Well, he doesn't have the same track record as Hopkins or Jones or Antonio Brown, but I believe he has the biggest upside. All right, in 2018, as the Packers wide receiver 1, he saw, that is, Davante Adams, his targets jumped by 50, all the way up to 169. And with that many targets, Adam turned in the number 3 season. It was great. Now, this year, he has a new kind of modern-day offense to help him out. He should have even more opportunities to score, even more targets. Everything should, in theory, be better for him. This coaching staff should put Rodgers and Adams into the best situation to succeed. But even if the offense doesn't click right away, right, this staff should be better than the monstrosity, the horribleness that they had last season, where they fired their coach halfway through the year, and nobody can get on the same page. Yet Adams was still able to break out. So I would say his floor is what he did last year, and that is a season where he had 111 receptions, 1,386 yards, and 13 touchdowns. I think that is his floor. I think Adams has a top 3 floor with a very real chance to finish number 1 this year, as him and Rodgers get on the same page with the coaching staff, and he ends up as wide receiver number 1. That's why I have him ranked here. I have no problem drafting him 5th. As soon as those top 4 running backs go off the board, you're talking about your Saquon Barkleys, your Ezekiel Elliott's, your Kamaras, and your McCaffrey. As soon as those 4 players go off the board, I'm drafting Adams right there at number 5. I don't want any of those other running backs. I think there's a huge drop-off. I'd much rather have the number 1 wide receiver in football, Davante Adams. All right, that's it for the show today. Tomorrow we will be back with our wide receiver sleepers and any other fantasy news, of course. And then on Sunday, we'll be doing some more mock drafts, and I'll go through those, and we'll talk strategy and all that good, happy, fun stuff. Sunday is also when the NBA free agency period starts, but that'll start after the show's out. So on Monday, we'll be covering all the fantasy news of the NBA free agency, who signed where and what implications that has, and which players are still out there and available, and how that will change the fantasy landscape for us next year in the NBA. All right, that's it for today. I will see you again tomorrow. If you're listening to the show on a podcast, we would love a 5-star rating and a review. That would be wonderful. Help spread the word. If you're watching on YouTube, hello. Please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and leave us a question or comment below. As always, if you are looking for if you're looking for extra math help for your child ages 7 through 17, check out mathradio.com, our sponsor, www.mathradio.com. See you tomorrow.